Hey there, says we're live. I want to talk today, this afternoon, about intuition. And I want to just wait a minute because it takes a minute. There it is. Go live on the other platform. Wonderful. So I'd like to talk about intuition. Intuition. And, there's a word on this page, alchemist. And before we dive into intuition, I want to talk a little bit about what alchemy is, and why I use that word, why I think it's fun and not just fun for fun's sake, but powerful also. Um, Alchemy is a mix. Back hundreds of years, alchemist was kind of also a pharmacist and mixed chemicals, plants, herbs, to try and heal people and they also kind of branched into occult stuff and conjured things and all kinds of things. The and then there's a popular book by Paulo Coelho that I love, The Alchemist, and it tells a story as an allegory about finding your true passion, right? Your one true mission. Personal legend, he calls it, and I love that. Personal legend. Well, a legend, we all know what legends are, right? They're almost things that are too good to be true or impossible to believe. And then there's real legends like people in music or sports or leadership that are legends. And they're legends because of who they are, how they show up, and what they do. Legends of service, legends of love, legends of physical accomplishment. The guy that did free solo on El Capitan, I mean, that's a legend already, right? And personal legend is really the statement by Coelho in that book of the thing you are drawn to do. And the protagonist in that book was a sheep herder. He was a shepherd. And, he was at first at home with his parents, and then he wanted to be a shepherd, and he traveled all around. And he was really in search of meaning. He was in search of the meaning of his own life, like the thing. And he was drawn to different places across the straits into Africa, and he learned all he could there. And then he kept moving on, and he was in search of this personal legend. And he met, it's funny because in one of the villages, he met someone called Melchizedek. And if you know the Old Testament, you know who Melchizedek is. He's a high profile high priest. And he recognized him because of the breastplate that he wore, had gold jewels and gold stuff on it. And that's legend that Melchizedek wore such a thing. Anyway, if you know your Old Testament history and so forth. But I want to talk about your personal legend. And today I want to talk about intuition, alchemy, personal legends, that kind of thing. When I was young, I had dreams just like all of us did. When we were young, we were going to change the world in some way or another. And, I talked to a lot of people that when they were young, they wanted to be this or that. I never really had anything. I don't know what that means. I didn't have something that, wow, I really want to do that or be that. I lived in a lot of fear and wasn't sure what to do. I felt like I didn't know what I was supposed to do. And everything in my life, in my space, my universe was ruled by the idea of what I'm supposed to do. That's the only thing to consider, and everything else is just wrong. And that clouded my vision. The first time I remember feeling any kind of a draw, a personal legend, is when I was in Belgium. Now, from age 19 to 21, I served mission for my church, and another thing I was supposed to do, so I did, and it was very enjoyable, and I learned a lot of stuff. Learned one language really well, Flemish, and learned quite a bit of French because Belgium is bilingual. And I got a chance to teach people about Christ, teach them about the restoration of the gospel of Christ and the meaning of love and service and covenants and all the things that are associated with that. But anyway, in that time, there was a city, and I went into I don't remember what city it was, but I went into the shop. And in the shop was a couple, and they were like straight up hippies, right? And I can say that. I grew up in the San Francisco Bay Area. I was born in 1955, and so I was 12 years old in 1967. The Summer of Love, and I remember that very clearly. I remember the sit-ins and all the stuff that was happening at San Francisco State University and other universities about Vietnam. And at the end of my high school time, right at the end, I did have to register for the draft. And the actual draft ended the year that I graduated. So I didn't have to go, but I knew people that did. Anyway, in that, and so I knew like hippies firsthand was there. So this sort of hippie attire and persona was this man, and I presume his wife. I think he told me they were married. But anyway, they were running this antique shop. And I asked them how they got in this business and was just asking them all kinds of questions. And they said something that stuck with me to this day. And I got to remember, I'm 20 years old. I'm now 68. So 48, nearly 50 years later, it's really stuck out to me. He said, or she said, or both of them, they were together and they said, well, this is just always what we've wanted to do. This is what we really wanted to do is, buy, sell old things, collectibles, antiques, and so forth. Now, in that shop, I found an old leather jacket that was very, very thick, really thick leather, and it looked like it might have been from World War II. So I bought that and took it home, and I kept it for decades. I don't have it now. I just don't have it anymore. I got rid of it. I don't mean got rid of it, but sold it. But anyway, what stuck with me was we're doing this because we want to. We really want to do this antique shop. And that was the first time in my life I had ever met anyone who said, I'm doing this because I want to. This is really what I want to do. And it's just struck me like hard. And I thought, what do I want to do? And I didn't even know the answer. I did not know. I don't know what I want to do. I want to be when I grow up, right? And I thought about that. And within a few months, I decided what I really wanted to be was a musician. I wanted to do music. I wanted to play piano and do other things. And that certainly wasn't on the approved list where I grew up and in my family. So I didn't get any kind of support, lots of negative comments about that. And when I got home from that missionary experience, I started diving into that. I dove into synthesizers and started, composing music. And I'd composed some earlier, but started recording things and just kind of went into it with zero support. And so I felt torn all the time between what I really wanted to do and what I thought I was supposed to do. And this is why I wanted to talk to you today about intuition. There's your own personal desires. We all have those. There's intuition, which is some feeling, and you can decide where it comes from. Revelation, whisperings, inner knowing, you can call it whatever you want, but it always feels like it comes from somewhere else. And when I experience intuition, it feels peaceful, it feels quiet, and it feels reassuring. Call it inspiration, call it revelation. But when you feel that, it feels good. And because of how I was raised and my interpretation of those experiences, I didn't believe that I could do that or that I should do that. And it took me decades before I finally realized and owned the idea that I could create my life the way I wanted. And not only could I do that, but that's the best thing that I can do. That is the very best expression of me as a divine being. And I would suggest perhaps as a possibility that that's so for you also. And we are so socialized with the ideas that we're supposed to do and be and think and act and earn and live a certain way that we don't explore that. Because I had the experience of dying in 2018, I have, some experiences that are perhaps rare, I don't know, but not shared by a lot of people. But I know for sure that you and I, we were made on purpose, lovingly and carefully created with mission and purpose. And I used this background today, kind of foggy, right? I did that on purpose, not foggy, but out of focus, because often when we look at our life and think about life purpose, it feels about like that, kind of foggy and out of focus. And so one of the things that I have spent a lot of time working on in the last 15 years since I walked away from my 30-year career is identifying what is that thing that I'm called to do. And I now know what it is. And it is crystal clear. It's not foggy at all. It's crystal clear. And guess what? It involves the music. It involves writing and performing songs, something I felt intuitively for the first time when I was 20. So 48 years ago. And I had neither the wisdom, certainly not the encouragement, but didn't have the wisdom or the courage or the understanding to own that and go do it. And so in the last 15 years, since I had a divine intervention in 2007 and walked away from 30-year career and started over again, I have been pursuing that. But, even that has been difficult for me because there was layers and layers of sort of this, no, don't do that. It's not the right thing. I don't know if you felt that, where you're uncertain and you feel like, I don't know for sure what I'm supposed to do. I don't know if this is the right thing. And we have these funny ways of measuring it. Sometimes we think, well, if it doesn't work very well, it must not be the right thing. That's not true. I know that for sure because opposition is the very thing that causes us to get strength. If there wasn't gravity, lifting weights wouldn't do any good. So the resistance, as Pressfield calls it, both internal and external, is a powerful and important part of the intuition. It's a powerful and important part of growth. Without it, without the resistance, we wouldn't grow. We wouldn't be able to grow powerfully and do what we want to do at the level of excellence, at the level of greatness, at the level of making a real difference. So in this idea of intuition, I want to say several things. One, I want to encourage you to cultivate your ability to hear it. Now, I don't know what your intuition is going to sound like to you, but here's some things that I've noticed from myself and from others. It always feels like it's not your voice. It feels quieter. It feels more peaceful. It also feels more powerful. And when intuition speaks, or the muse, as Pressfield calls it, or your divine, revelation or something, it speaks with a certainty that you just know, like you understand it. You may choose not to do it. It may frighten you. You may say, well, I don't know, and all those kinds of things, but you know what you've heard. You know what you've heard. And the second thing is it's always an invitation. It's always an invitation. Now, there might be times when you get a real strong impression not to do something. It's protection, and you may have been protected or guided to avoid an accident or something traumatic. And I certainly believe that that's there. But I'm talking about this intuition about who you are in the world and how you show up and what you are called to do, because you have a mission and purpose. You may already be doing it, or you may not. It doesn't matter. What matters is what you do from this moment forward. So I would invite you and suggest that it's valuable to cultivate your ability to hear intuition, hear revelation, hear inspiration, whatever name you use for that. How? Well, number one is you have to have time. You have to have space where you're quiet and still, because the voice of inspiration is quiet. It rarely screams, if ever. It whispers. Even though it is powerful and certain, it whispers. And if you or I, we don't create stillness and space in our lives for it to come, we won't hear it. It's like having a noisy stereo on, and so you can't hear something quiet in the room, a whisper. So that's the first thing, is you have to create space and time. I use meditation, which is simply a structured practice of stillness, where you quiet your body and your mind, and then you listen. Now, in prayer, which is a form of this, you might come with an agenda. If you're speaking to the divine, you might be expressing gratitude for different things, or you might be inquiring for direction, or you might be asking forgiveness. No matter what your agenda is, if you go into meditation or into prayer, What I have noticed is it is critical to leave space, to listen, because communication with the divine is a two-way street. Like if you and I are talking, if I just talk and I don't listen, I don't know anything. Or if you just talk and you don't listen, you don't know anything either. We have to be open, not just quiet, but actually open. So if I'm quiet, but I'm thinking about something else while you're talking, we didn't communicate. So cultivating a practice of stillness, whether you just meditate and be in stillness, or whether you pray and meditate and you have an agenda of things you're thinking about and on which you're seeking direction or considering, always allow there to be stillness. So that's the first couple of things. The next thing is record impressions. Sometimes it's hard to write down what we feel. We don't have the words, and it's sometimes difficult to express those things in writing, but do it anyway. I write down in a journal, I just label it Revelation, and I'll put the date on top. Revelation, May 3rd or 2024, and write down the best that I can without too much thinking. Just write down what I think I'm feeling or I heard. And you can go back and read it later. And I'll tell you, my experience is I'm amazed. I am utterly amazed in a day or a week, even a month or a year, when I come back and read some of those things. I notice a consistency across them. Some of the language, some of the direction is powerful. It is consistent, and it is edifying or uplifting. It's a blessing. It is, it just feels good. And those kinds of powerful feelings make it feel like it's connected to your higher self or the divine. So cultivate your ability. Always leave silence. Record your impressions. And there's lots more to say, but the last one I want to talk about is action. If we don't do anything at all with it, it fades. Impressions, however deep and exciting, they fade with time. And they fade with interruption, and they fade with the next bright object and the next loud noise. They fade. And that fade is the opposite of what we need. So to make sure, for me, I'm sharing with you something that I do in my personal truth document, which is in my morning warm-up. I call my morning routine my morning warm-up, how I warm up for the day. Part of the document that I have memorized is this, and I use the word prayer because my relationship with the divine is strong. And so I say, I am, that each day I draw breath. I prepare powerfully for the purpose and mission I have declared, which is earlier in the statement. And then I say, I am that I pray from my deepest heart to pour out gratitude, beg forgiveness, and plead for direction. And I use those words, pour out gratitude and beg forgiveness and plead for direction, as a representation to remind me of the intensity that I feel about my mission and purpose. And I'm not suggesting these are right or the right way for anyone else, but they work powerfully for me. The second part is I am that I listen intently for thoughts and feelings that come during prayer and throughout the day. Because like I said, that voice sounds different to me. And it feels different. And the last one is what we're talking about right now. I say, I am that I act without fear or delay on answers and revelation I receive. And I do that even if I do it wrong. And by wrong, I don't even know what I mean, except I did something and it didn't turn out like I thought. So is that wrong? I would say no, because I took action. Everything that you do has an outcome. The outcome is instructive. It did what I thought it would do or it didn't, and that doesn't really matter. I took an action. I got an outcome. I can make an assessment and decide what to do next. So I'm sharing this really personal, deeply personal stuff with you, not for anything about me, but to invite you to cultivate deeply your ability to hear revelation, intuition, inspiration, because it's there and it will guide you. It isn't the easy path to get to where you're going, but it is the path of growth. Revelation, inspiration, intuition is always the path of growth, courage, service, and love. It is never the easy button, or at least not in my experience. I want to give you 3 invitations. If you feel like you're living your life exactly like you want, what I call the ultimate life, the life of your dreams, the purpose, prosperity, and joy are the words that I use. But if you feel like you've got that, I'd love to get to know you and I'd love to chat. And there's several reasons for that. One, I love to get to know people who have accomplished that and are living that way, so that we can talk about what we're doing and how that works. I also love to help people spread their message. So you may be a messenger with a message of resilience, hope, capability, power, accomplishment. And I'd love to share that on my podcast or on my other television shows if you want that. So that would be an invitation. The second invitation is, if you're not living the life you dream, then I would invite a connection and a conversation, because I'd like to understand what's in your way. What is preventing you? What are you struggling with? What are the 8 balls that are in front of you that are keeping you from having what you want? And maybe I can help, because my mission is to help 250 million people discover and serve with their gifts, listen to their intuition, create impossible things, because impossible is just an opinion. It's not true. It's just not true. The third invitation is, I would invite you, if you haven't done so already, to go to the URL that's on the screen, www.yourultimatelife.ca, because there I've got something called the 5 Master Keys to Create Your Ultimate Life. And it is the 5 things that I have done to get to where I live every day, a life of purpose, prosperity, and joy. So I would invite you to do that also. I'd love to hear from you. I'd love to hear how you're adding good to the world. I care about your greatness, and whether I'm talking to you face to face or virtually, I love you. I acknowledge your divinity, and I'll see you tomorrow.